What was
That's their standard. They didn't move anything. It's their standard monthly meeting. But it's okay, it doesn't matter.
No, that's good. And I don't either. We don't care. We will do whatever we need.
Our city manager, Mr. Dias, gave a statement about today's meeting with our new additions of Zoom and changing our public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today is April 13th. This is a regular meeting of the Stuart City Commission. Pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69 issued by the Officer of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Florida Statute 120.54. Procedures for public comment by device such as laptop, tablet, computer, smartphone. If you wish to speak during public comment, click participants, then click raise hand at the bottom of the participant window. Your microphone will be unmuted when you are called to speak, and you will be invited to activate your camera if you wish. Both will be deactivated once your comment time is completed. If you are attending by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. You will be called to participate by the displayed phone number, so please listen for that phone number. We will only call the last 3 digits of the phone number. The host will lower your hand and mute your microphone after your allotted time to speak. Please state your name and address clearly when commenting during public comment. All public comment will be taken at the beginning of the agenda during comment time and not during the agenda items. So if you plan to speak on an agenda item, please raise your hand at the time for general public comment. During roll call, I ask all commissioners to advise the clerk whether or not you are appearing in person or remotely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dias. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Before we say the pledge, let's all just take a moment of silence to remember one of our own that we lost last week, a member of the Stewart family, Mr. Chuck Eckhart, who has been with us for 17 years, both at 10th Street and at Public Works. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Plenty of liberty still today, Mr. Mortel. Okay, we have 2 proclamations today. The first being Water Conservation Month for April 2020. Unfortunately, we aren't having anybody except in person. Mr. Mortel, would you read the proclamation, please?
Whereas water is a basic and essential need for every living creature, and whereas the state of Florida Water Management Districts and the city of Stuart are working together to increase awareness about the importance of water conservation. Whereas the city of Stuart and the state of Florida has designated April, typically a dry month when water demands are most acute, Florida's Water Conservation Month, to educate citizens about how they can help save Florida's precious water resources. And whereas the city has always encouraged and supported water conservation through various educational programs, most recently WaterFest. And whereas every business, industry, school, and citizen can make a difference when it comes to conserving water and can help by saving water and thus promote a healthy economy and community. Now, therefore, I, Michael J. Meyer, Mayor of the City of Stuart, Florida, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2020 as Water Conservation Month in the City of Stuart, Florida, and is calling upon each citizen and business to help protect our precious resource by practicing water-saving measures and becoming more aware of the need to save water.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. We would have had Ms. Kathy LaMartina, our coordinator at the South Florida Water Management District, and my friend, and of course, Ann Ellie, our Conservations and Sustainability Programs Coordinator, Public Works of the City of Stuart. Moving on to item number 2, the Guardian Ad Litem Month for April. Mr. Mortel.
Whereas April has been designated National Child Abuse Prevention Month, And whereas April 19th through April 25th, 2020 has been designated as National Volunteer Appreciation Week. And whereas the Guardian Ad Litem program is a partnership of volunteers and staff who advocate for the best interest of abused, abandoned, and neglected children within our community. And whereas there are at least 200 children in Martin County involved in the court system through no fault of their own. And whereas there are 82 citizens of Martin County advocating for their community's children. Now therefore, I, Michael J. Meyer, Mayor of the City of Stuart, do hereby proclaim April 2020 as Guardian Ad Litem Month in the City of Stuart and urge all citizens to give of their time to make a difference in the lives of our most vulnerable children by volunteering with the Guardian Ad Litem program.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Ms. Jennifer Manis, the Volunteer Liaison Training Coordinator for the 19th Circuit, would have been accepting, but because she's not here, we mailed the proclamation to her.
Excuse me, if I may, we can vote now.
Yes, I'm so sorry we skipped roll call. Thanks, Barry. Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
For the record, if I may, Mayor Meyer,
Here.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Here, present at City Hall, 121 Southwest Fiber Avenue, on April 13th, my birthday.
Commissioner Bruner,
Here, present in person.
Commissioner Glassman,
Present in person.
Commissioner Matheson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall, and I apologize for that. Let the record reflect that everybody was here on time. It's Wednesday. Okay, moving on to our service awards. Such a shame we don't have our people here. For 5 years of service with the Stuart PD, Courtney Jonas. For 5 years of service with Stuart PD, Mr. Zachary Pecci. For 5 years of service with Stuart Fire Rescue, Mr. Anthony Pesaturo. For 5 years of service with Stuart PD, Christopher Rudiger. And for 15 years, a nice one, Technology Services, Mr. Bradford Blankman. And then for April Service Awards, in Public Works, we have 5 years with Mr. Michael Goldberg. Thank you all. We're lucky to have you, even in the best of times and in these crazy times. Captain Hurtado, we have you up for a COVID-19 update, sir.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, I appreciate it. I'm here to give you a brief update on the city's. Here to give you a brief update to the city's response to COVID-19. For Martin County, in case you didn't see today, we have 124 total cases and 3 deaths, unfortunately. At the 6:30 update, they should be adding 8 more cases to the total count. I was working to break down the city cases because if you notice on the dashboard, it only says Stuart, right? So we're getting, shows we have a lot of cases when we don't actually. So I'm trying to break down what was in the city specifically. And before I left the office, what I could find was 11 cases in the city of Stuart. One of the cases that's going to be added later today is in the city, so it's hard to track some of those because there are some PO boxes and addresses and stuff like that. So I'm not sure exactly, but from what I could break down and find, it looks like we have 12 in the city, which would be about 10% of the total county cases. In the event you didn't see the total Florida cases, it's 20,601 with 470 deaths. But again, I'll update at 6:30, so anticipating a rise there. The trend on that, it looks like it's holding steady around 1,100 cases per day for the state of Florida added. And for Martin County, it looks like we're adding about 20 cases a week. So that's kind of where the trend is from what I was able to see today. And again, that varies based on every update. And so it depends on how the 6:30 looks, and that will change. So it could be outdated information by the time we finish here. We're monitoring all the updates and attending all the meetings that are held countywide to ensure that we get the most recent information and updates so that we can push it out to the public and to our our city personnel and our first responders. So that's our big focus, making sure we attend those, and it fluctuates based on the day. There could be 3 meetings a day or 1, depending on what day of the week it is and what's going on. So it tends to fluctuate up and down on that end. As far as our response goes, specifically on the first responder side, all of our first responders have PPE issued to them, and we have amended response protocols. I think we talked about it at the last meeting. So, and dispatchers are asking some advanced questions that were provided by fire rescue. So before they go, we have a good idea as whether how they're answering those questions. If we're going to be encountering somebody who is a potential case or may need to get testing, and obviously our officers and firefighters and other response personnel are gearing up properly to deal with that. So the goal is, even if we do come in contact with them on the road or on call, that our employees are not exposed if they're wearing the proper protective equipment at the time. If you weren't aware, we had some of our officers who had been tested, and the tests were pending and were out. All of our officers have returned and were negative, so that's good. We're back fully staffed. We were down with a few officers who had to be out due to potential exposure, but they were not exposed, so that's good news. I wanted to commend the Martin County Emergency Management Agency. They've been really good shot the information, working with us. We've been getting a lot of resources in, and I brought a list of, to give you just a brief update of the resources we've received from them that went through the state and then came into the county, and then were dispersed out to us and around to all the other entities. So far we've received 7 deliveries from the state through the Martin County Emergency Management that have been delivered. We've gotten hundreds of surgical masks, gloves, gowns, a lot of sanitizer, as I see you have on the desk there.
I got a growing collection.
You have a collection of them, right? So we received, like I said, 7. We've got another shipment today, more sanitizer and gowns and surgical masks and stuff. So it's slowly coming in. We've been able to place a couple outside orders on our own, finding sanitizer and some N95 masks. Those are hard to come across, but from my discussions today, we're on the first responder side, we're stocked up for right now. We're just trying to anticipate future needs depending on how long the situation goes. So for now, I think we're good. We have more orders pending with the state and through our outside entities that we're attempting to locate resources from. On the reimbursement angle, the last thing just to speak about is we did apply for public assistance once the disaster declaration was issued. So we met that deadline, which I'm sure they'll extend. And we are tracking through finance. There's a code applied to all the purchases that we're making for COVID-19. And as far as the overtime and salaries and stuff, that is also being tracked with our activity logs as needed. And so we're trying to do our best we can to get a good picture of what our expense will be at the end so that we can apply for whatever reimbursement may be available. And then the last thing is there have been some grant opportunities that have come up. We're looking into those grant opportunities, determining whether we're eligible or not, and working with finance on that. So trying to attack all those different angles, and then just obviously planning in case it's a prolonged response. Hopefully not. Hopefully we're coming up to that peak they talked about and then start the downslide, but in case we don't, hopefully we'll be prepared and planning to be prepared for that. Any questions or comments?
Yeah. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Oh, okay, so, you're mentioning the police department, is that the same, thing for our fire department? They're pretty much covered in terms of their supply and so on?
I believe so, yes ma'am. I met with one of the fire chiefs today, and we're discussing PPE needs, and we're trying to do is we're saying now we're covered. We have enough for the next few weeks of the response, and so what we're working on is we'll be putting some orders into the state with a projected outage date of 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now. So that's where we stand. I believe we're good at this current rate and what we have. Just projecting out if we go 4 weeks or longer than 4 weeks, then we will need more supplies at that point. So what we're trying to do is get our resource requests in now, saying our projected outage date will be May 12th or however far that is out. So yes, we're covered now. That covers us and the fire department.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll ask my direct comment.
Okay. Any other questions for the captain?
Is there, can you give an update on how long tests are still taking in Martin County? I I know last talk, there was kind of a lag time in Cleveland Clinic, and is there also any fast track for our first responders when they come in contact at this time, or are they waiting that same length of time?
I can answer the second question because we went through that on both ends. One of our officers was tested at Cleveland Clinic, and they were able to work with the Department of Health to get that test expedited. We got that back in 3 days, and then our other officer who was tested last week was tested through our wellness center, and we got those results back within 3 to 4 days. So we are able to get first responders back quicker, or quickly, I should say. As far as how long the test is taking, my understanding of it is it depends on who takes the test and where it's shipped to. If that answers your question. So I believe the physicians and clinics are sending it to private labs, and then if the Department of Health takes it, it's going to the Department of Health lab. So I feel like it depends on where they go. Some of the labs ship it out of state to get those results. And my understanding, and I don't want to speak if the Department of Health or somebody's on the line and could answer this, it depends on if it's shipped out of state. It could take longer shipping terms, and then how busy that lab specifically is. So I think it depends on where you get tested.
Okay.
But to answer your question, we can get a faster response for first responders who are believed or needing testing.
Good, thank you.
Just also another thanks out there to Mike Mortel and also United Way for getting these masks for the city staff. Thank you, both of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Appreciate your work. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to comments by city commissioners. Let's begin with Commissioner Glasslight.
Yes, mine's more of a, I guess just a thought. There was several really significant thunderstorms and tornadoes last night in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and then unfortunately there were a few deaths. And as I was listening to the news this morning, thinking about that, I mean, we in Florida also have a potential of tornadoes, severe weather. And I just was thinking, what if that happened to us like next week? What are our plans for evacuations or places that we may have people, that we may need to evacuate people to in light of COVID? And I certainly don't think we have an answer for that, or maybe we do, but I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Because tornadoes and thunderstorms certainly aren't anything that we can plan for, or if we can plan for it, we just can't expect it. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there to staff, just as a what if, so we can plan for that if something devastating like that happens.
I feel like in one of my EOC scenarios where they throw 7 different highly volatile situations on you at the same time. So we do have those exercises. Most of them revolve around radiological exercises that we do with the power plant. And they always throw what's called an interject, where they throw in another crisis on top of a crisis on top of a crisis. And so in particular, we'll take the example of a tornado and having to flee the area or evacuate the area. We would do what we're doing now with coordinating for off-site medical facilities. So we would look at places that are empty that did not get damaged, say for instance schools or whatever that did not get damaged, where we have an area where we can put high population, and we would have to deal with obviously the social distancing issues at that location. We would more than likely, and I'm speaking out of turn here because I'm not the health department or whoever we making those decisions, would be doing the testing protocols, questioning, temperature taking, all that kind of stuff before we brought people in. But just like with any other disaster planning situation or crisis mitigation, you're resolving the interjects as they occur based on your past training and stuff you've done in the previous scenario-based stuff that we've done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Glad we have a plan. Yay.
Somewhat.
Anything else, Commissioner?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great point, and we had talked with Captain Hurtado last emergency meeting, special meeting, about the unified command planning for hurricane season at least. But you're right, something even sooner. So hopefully that has been heard and could be brought up at the next meetings to make sure that those plans are in place. Captain?
Is it okay if I add to that?
Please.
The city manager said, he's right, we do practice that a lot, and they have identified sites for alternate care in case there's a surge at the hospital or something that overwhelms us. But what we talked about in one of the last unified command meetings is, and this relates to hurricane season, I touched on it briefly on Zoom, but it's harder to get whole information out over Zoom, so I wanted to, while we're here, mention it, is they are working with local hotels to secure hotel rooms, because obviously then you can socially distance. You can put one family in a room, and then they're socially distant from another family. So they're working with the hotels who may be empty, to secure those rooms in the event. And this is for COVID, but it would apply in that situation that you mentioned. If we did get hit with a tornado, and there was hotels we had contracts with, we could put people who were displaced into those hotel rooms. And then it would also apply to hurricane season. That's a much larger scale, and hopefully we don't go that long, but then you do the same thing. We have blocks of hotel rooms where you could put people who need to be evacuated out, because those are built to the high standards for the Cat 5 hurricanes.
So do we currently have, is it we as in the city, or is it the county that reaches out to these hotels and puts contracts negotiations through? Do we already have that process in place?
Yes, the process is in place. The county is already working on it through the emergency management agency there, and then us as the city, we work working with the county with whatever they may need to assist them in sheltering city residents, specifically in the event that occurs. And what I'll do is for the next meeting, I'll bring that point up, or city manager there, we can definitely discuss that with them and make sure that city residents will be covered in the event that that's needed, and I'm sure it will.
Yeah, because I had heard in one of the last calls when Michelle was at EMA was talking about that, what do they call it, non-transitory housing through FEMA, that the city, the municipalities were included in the county's application.
Right, yes, it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Matheson, let's do it like old days, shovel cards.
First off, happy birthday again, Vice Mayor. I want to again thank all City of Stewart employees. I know we've touched on our first responders, but also Public Works and all employees for taking the adaptations that are required in stride, positive attitude. I wanted to again mention Mr. Eckhart. He was always happy and jolly, kind of a face of Public Works payment area. I'd like to mention, if you haven't filed for a tax return in the past few years, the IRS would need your information so that you'd still be eligible, most likely, for a stimulus check. You can enter your information at irs.gov/coronavirus and click on the tab for non-filers. That's non-filers at this point in time. In the near future, hopefully mid-April, they're stating that those that have received checks in the mail can update their information so that they can get direct deposit from the IRS for the stimulus checks. So keep monitoring that website, and City of Stewart will as well. If you're eligible and the IRS has your information for direct deposit, you'll be receiving those stimulus checks a lot faster. When you do get those, please remember there to stimulate the American economy. So your purchases, try to purchase American-made products, please. I'd like to reiterate, this was talked about a little bit last meeting. There's a lot of nonprofits out there. My wonderful wife works at the Kane Center, the Council on Aging, and they have plenty of capacity for the free meals that are given out to anyone over the age of 60, Monday through Friday at the 10th Street Community Center. They're free, anyone over the age of 60. All they have to do is contact the Kane Center and sign up. Their number is 772-223-7826. Please don't be embarrassed, but due to shifting of adult daycare and in-person areas, they do have plenty of capacity for anyone who would like to go there. Lastly, I'd like to shift topics, and I know I'm excited, and I'm sure all my fellow commissioners are, on our upcoming agenda item on our vision statement. I am hoping, and pending no major storms, we might be looking at going at least few years, maybe with zero discharges out the St. Lucie locks in South Fork. Lake Okeechobee levels at 11.47 feet as of today. Flows south are still fairly good. Flows west have slightened a little bit. That is understandable due to the low water in the lake, but they are still flowing west of Kusatchee more than they have historically at this time of year with this lake conditions. So I want to thank the Corps for how they've been managing it lately. Other than that, I've seen a few of my fellow commissioners, their videos online on the city's website. Mr. Bruner, yours is yet to come, but I'm excited to see it. I want to thank all of my fellow commissioners for their positive, uplifting, and encouraging comments to our residents. So together, we're all going to get through this, even though we're going to be a little bit apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bruner?
I just want to say it was so good to hear the report that none of our police officers, all their tests come back positive. Sometimes we commissioners get an email that other people don't see, and I just always, my heart goes out for them. But it's so good to hear that it's all positive in that fashion. We appreciate the help we get from our officers and our fire department. You mentioned how we're going to get through it. It's just a great little city to live in and good community. And I think that all of us working together, doing the right thing, what our president wants us to do, that we'll come out far ahead. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor, anything?
Yes, I think, is he out there? Officer, he just came? Okay. So, sorry. That was, David, Thompson, Dr. Thompson's son. He just passed away recently, and we had done a little, note remembering his passing. So I gave the officer. I just wanted to first thank our leaders. And especially our local leaders, our city, ourselves as leaders of the city, and our city manager who helps us, and all the staff that helps us. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I'm definitely going to give them a for what we're doing.
Thank you.
I just appreciate them. I appreciate our police department. I know the citizens appreciate them. And what now? I mean, it seems dreary and it's tough. We don't know what is in the atmosphere around us. We don't know what we're breathing in, if we're the ones carrying it or we're the ones getting it. And it is a tough time. But I say, what better time to be a leader and to try to show that you're a leader and to do leadership skills. And I just think that it is almost a God-given time, that it's so good that we have people who are working hard in the city of Stewart and is making this place truly a better place to live. So I just want to, my heart quiver, like Commissioner Bruner said, when you read the emails and you see certain things and you wonder, is it going to be, even when you don't feel well yourself one day, or you see somebody else or you hear someone else. But I tell you, that has really put us to the test, and I appreciate the staff for coming in, for managing themselves, for doing what they need to do, and still keeping things going. And I really, really appreciate that. With regard to Mr. Eckert, I've known him and his family from Boy Scout days with my kids and his mom, and it's just, it's surreal. It's surreal. Every time I hear of these incidences these days, no matter what the reasoning, it is just so surreal. And my heart goes out to his family. Commissioner Matheson mentioned about the IRS checks. I just want to mention that April 1st was a big day, although today April 13th is a big day too, but April 1st, everybody was supposed to have answered the census. We have this whole issue of the census worker going out into homes and everybody's saying, oh, they're gonna be scared of a dog or something, or somebody slamming the door in their face. Now, we have to really do things differently. And I'd encourage everybody in Stewart, everybody in Martin County, anybody who goes to our website and reads anything or sees what we're streaming today or any other time, please go on the US.gov census page and answer whatever needs to be answered. Find out how you can update and answer so that we don't have that problem come July of this year. Please let us do our best to answer the census and to get that information out, because I don't know what their plans are in terms of sending workers out to knock on doors, but we all know that we're in difficult and perilous times. So please remember, find out if you haven't answered the census for your family, your household, please answer the census and get that out. Today is the first meeting for April. And we had planned a few weeks ago that we'd still have this meeting, even though we have the COVID. But one thing I've asked to do, and everybody has kindly accepted that, was to have an arts moment, the first meeting of every month. And so we don't have an arts moment this month. But in memory of Dr. Thompson, and also before I forget, a former mayor in the city of Stewart, Mr. Robert Hall, also passed away during the past few weeks. So Mr. Hall has passed away, and Dr. Thompson has passed away, and he has been a cultural icon. So I'd like to, Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, just replace the arts moment today by just saying a short poem, because Dr. Thompson was always somebody who does poetry, and he was very culturally inclined. And I think this is a message that he would have said. I think I read the same poem at the passing of Commissioner James Christie, Mayor James Christie. And I think the same message goes forward and would be appropriate in memory of Dr. Thompson and all the things that he's done in the community, and to see the perilous times that we're with. And it's a poem. I don't have the author right now, but I left that. But it's called Keep a Going. If you strike a thorn or rose, keep a going. If it hails or if it sows, keep a going. Tain't no use to sit and whine when the fish ain't on your line. Bait your hook and keep a trying, keep a going. When the weather kills your crop, keep a going. Though 'tis work to reach the top, keep a going. Suppose you're out of every dime, getting broke ain't no crime. Tell the world you're feeling prime, keep a going. When it looks like all is up, keep a going. Drain the sweetness from the cup, keep a going. See the wild birds on the wing, hear the bells that sweetly sing. When you feel like singing, sing, keep a going. And I'd say that to everybody here, keep a going. And I know that truly Dr. Thompson would say that to us today, to keep a going and stay positive during this whole time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I really appreciate your arts moment for today. Thank you. Good words for today. I'll be brief. I just wanted to remind our citizens and each other that as we continue to look at the data points that are coming in, although testing capabilities for COVID are increasing, there's more tests available and the turnaround times are becoming shorter. These data points for confirmed cases in Martin County are truly stale data points. They reflect a point in time from before, and they are subject to inadequacies that they don't necessarily cover everybody. So I continue to urge people to not focus too much on the confirmed cases I think if anything, we should really focus on making sure that our hospitalization rates stay low, and that the trends in those data points don't rise too quickly, because that's when we know we're going to potentially get in trouble. Death rates and hospitalization rates should be where we're focusing, because that's the critical part of how it will impact our community. But so far, it seems like with the data that we do have, that the growth trend is not quite logarithmic or exponential, that it's still pretty linear. So that's, of course, we wish that it would just stop and go back down, but at least it's not rising faster and faster at a rate, a faster rate every day, but seems to kind of be going up steadily. So we can only hope that that it won't pick up the pace. And I think that that shows that these measures, while difficult, are working, and that we need to keep at them for as long as the scientists and statisticians and epidemiologists suggest. And I would also like to say that I know that there was some comment in the public that at last meeting, although we all found out that we had little power to vary from the governor's order, I just wanted to remind everybody that because of Sunshine Law, we 5 commissioners don't get a chance to ever talk. And this is the hardest thing that we've ever gone through together. And so I am not ashamed at all that we spent 2 hours discussing this critical issue that impacts the lives and safety of our residents. And I would have gone on a couple more hours if we all decided that there was more we wanted to talk about. So I don't think any of us should feel ashamed for asking questions, trying to figure out how best to serve our community, even if it turns out that there's not a lot that we are legally allowed to do. So I thank you all for your questions and for taking the time. And we should continue to do so, because this isn't over. So let's stay strong and keep working at it. Mr. Dias, any comments?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain an approval of the agenda.
Second. Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Mayor Clark and a second by Commissioner Glass-Layton for the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Agenda carries unanimously. Okay, so again, a deviation from our standard procedure. We will be taking comments from the public now. These comments are not just general comments, but also comments regarding every agenda item moving forward on this agenda. So anybody who would like to speak on an item will do so at this time and notify which item they would like to speak about.
Yes, sir. So if there's anyone present at City Hall, please present a green card to Captain Roth. Those who are visiting online, please raise your hand at this time, and we'll get to you as soon as we finish with those who are here in person. And we have no one at the Flagler Center, sir.
Mr. Dias has decided that we would take comment from our physical location here at the City Hall chamber first as standard procedure, then following with any overflow, if there were to be any at the Flagler Center, and finally with anybody raising their hand via Zoom. So is there any comment here in the chambers? I do see a green card. Right, we're taking item comments now as well.
That's what I figured.
Mr. Quadler, are you speaking on behalf of the applicant or as a?
I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant.
So we'll take that during the item.
Okay.
Even though it's not comment, you would be
I am the applicant.
an interested party. You're the applicant. Okay, seeing no public comment here in the chamber, do we have any hands raised online?
Yes, I have a hand from Ms. Richards.
Hi there. I'm going to see if I can. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Richards.
Hi there. My name is Linda K. Richards. I'm at 166 Southwest Cabana Point Circle. Thank you, Council, for my time to speak to you today. I wish I could be there in person. I'm taking, maybe you don't have a full room and maybe I should have come in person. Even in the events of this current pandemic, I feel it is time for me to speak out proactively about the growth of Martin County and the city of Stuart. Prior to the pandemic, I was following the change of land use at Bridgeview which is Indian Street and Canner, to allow for a 213 unit residential development. Now that's currently zoned, or it was zoned when it belonged to Martin County as a professional medical area. I've also been following the 4-story development over at Springtree prior to this pandemic. I'm here today because I've been informed that Costco development on Canner is going to come back, and from what I understand, there'll be a new application coming in. And I'm here to ask our city councilors to look at South Florida and ask ourselves if we really want to look like Boca Raton in 10 years. Our quaint seaside town, as described by our city at the public workshop for the comprehensive plan, is at risk to become another nondescript South Florida city. I left that meeting in December feeling like the main point of the comprehensive plan focused around the distinct downtown and the old neighborhoods of Stuart, with little care given to the outskirts where the city has annexed in the land from the county and they're aggressively developing, like Springtree, like Bridgeview, and like whatever the developers are gonna come forth with Costco to present on this land on Canner. All of these properties have been recently annexed into Stuart in the last few years. I'm here to remind you that a Costco in Stuart will change the landscape of our cities forever. Our neighbors from the north and south, they'll come in droves. They'll not visit our quaint downtown. They'll not go to our restaurants or our small businesses. They won't care about littering in our town. They won't really understand our way of life here. They won't know that there's a high school just down the road. And so they might not be aware for the safety of students who go to that school. There'll be a steady line of traffic coming in from I-95 and the Turnpike, in and out of Costco all day long. Over 10,000 cars a day. And let's also remember what happens in Costco during a time of disaster, whether it be a hurricane or this pandemic. We know what's going to happen. I know I'm speaking here before a new application has even hit the LPA's desk, and I know there are a lot more issues at hand these days, but I'm here to say to council that we're not going to sit idly by during this time of lockdown and see this huge corporation come in and change the landscape of our city. I'm asking council to remember the neighborhoods that will directly be affected, like De La Bahia, Hideaway Place, Cabana Point, Riverland, Marshlands Reserves, South River Condos, Martin's Crossings, Willoughby Golf Club, and all other housing communities along Canner, as well as Martin Highway and 714 Martin Downs Boulevard coming into Stuart. In closing, I would like to remind the council of the Future Land Use Act, a use element, objective A6, which talks about neighborhood stability. It says, quote, established residential neighborhoods shall be protected from the intrusion of competing intense uses through adherence to the future land use map, densities and intensities established in the future land use element implemented of the city's land development regulations and control of traffic and access for the protection of established residential uses. And I'll remind council that the land Costco is looking to develop was zoned residential in Martin County's comprehensive plan. Thank you again for your time. And I hope when the Costco plan hits your desk, you will remember that Stuart is a quaint seaside town. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Thank you. And thank you for attending via Zoom, being our very first Zoom commenter. Mr. Dice, are there any other hands raised?
I see no other hands. If there's anyone else online, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Seeing none, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay.
I have a hand up.
You have a hand up?
It's from the same person who just spoke.
Okay. So we will move on to consent. I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Glass-Layton and a second by Commissioner Matheson. Is there any discussion before voting? Seeing none, Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bruner,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Westlake. Yes. Commissioner Matheson,
Yes.
Mayor Martin.
Yes.
May I remind the board to please speak directly into the microphone, otherwise those who are on Zoom can't hear you.
Consent carries, passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Dias. Okay, moving on to item number 7 on commission action, the St. Lucie Estuary Lake Discharge Elimination Vision Statement. Mr. Mortel,
Good afternoon.
will you read the,
I don't know if you want to do it. I guess we'll do it.
I'll just read the resolution language.
Resolution number 37-2020, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, adopting a St. Lucie Estuary Lake Discharge Elimination Vision Statement for the purpose of defining a focused vision for the city and all future correspondence with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, South Florida Water Management District, and other local, state, and federal agencies concerning the management of Lake Okeechobee, requesting the United States Army Corps of Engineers adopt an operational goal targeting an 11-foot Lake Okeechobee elevation, NGVD, by June 1st each year, providing for an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Mr. Bogart.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that normally I'd be giving kind of the dreary news and everything else be hunky-dory. This time it's kind of reversed. This is actually all positive news tonight on the river water quality. The current status, as Commissioner Matheson had pointed out, was that the lake elevation right now is hovering around 11.5 feet. By comparison, last year, which was a great year for us with the water quality, that's actually 0.2 feet, a couple inches less than at this day as it was last year. So we're a little bit ahead in that regard. But ironically enough, if you looked at a 35-year average, I kind of pulled some numbers just to see generally what today would look like. In certainly March itself, you'd have an average elevation any given year in those 35 years of 2 feet higher than where it is right now. 2 feet, I want to point that out, I think it's so important. 2 feet can be a whole hurricane. 2 feet can be in a standard wet season, 2 to 3 months of rainfall. So 2 feet is an enormous buffer that we have going into the wet season that will potentially prevent us from getting, even with a significant storm season, getting even discharges from the lake at that point. So where we are today is as best shape as I've ever seen it, in more than 35 years, really, to look all data. So that's all great news. I do have to say for harmful algal bloom presence, there was a small bloom. I'm sure many of you saw the photos on social media. Small bloom that was present in the C-44 canal. Especially for the public who might be listening, I think it's important for everyone to kind of take a deep breath. It's not that we're deeply polluting the C-44 canal. I think it's important to realize that there is a ton of legacy pollution still in these water bodies. And the C-44 canal is, of course, where all that sediment and everything that comes from the lake first falls. That's where it goes. So yeah, I think it's perfectly rational to expect the canal itself to have blooms, small little blooms, but even without lake discharges for years to come until that pollution is kind of naturally cleaned up. So I think that's important to remember. It is not toxic, however. The health department and the DEP did test, so it didn't test positive for toxins. So even though that small bloom was present or is present, nothing to be too concerned with. Also, it's important to realize that the amount of water that's still going to the west of the Caloosahatchee, while it may not be as much as they'd like in a given time, they also understand and appreciate the Corps is still sending water their way. If you look at the 457 CFS cubic feet per second, that's kind of tantamount to about 3,400 gallons per second. So that's a lot of water still going to the West Coast, and we're not getting a single drop of it, which is exactly what we want. And the water conservation areas are all right around schedule, so it seems like this time of year, I don't think you could be any more on target. I certainly commend the Army Corps for that. The last thing I will say kind of touches with the vision statement itself that you have before you. It is something that Dr. Gary Goforth provided an initial draft. Some of you may recall he sent staff a draft that said that he thinks that this would be positive for the community. We got engaged with Dr. Goforth, with other community stakeholders, Commissioner Matheson especially, talking a lot about what that language should look like, what overall our entire vision for the LOSUM process and any future Lake Okeechobee regulation schedules, how that should be managed. I think what we came up with was language that even the West Coast, Martin County, were generally agreeable to, even though they might not directly approve this, they helped us directly with this language. So I want to make sure that it's understood by the public and everybody listening that this was kind of a consensus building exercise in addition to drafting the vision statement language generally from what we had at the beginning. So the LOSUM process right now, a lot of meetings, both subcommittee hearings and full committee hearings, all the PDT project delivery team members were canceled because of COVID-19 impacts. The good news is that gave the Army Corps a lot of time to take all and aggregate all the data that we've been sending them and to really start turning it into products, into models and everything else that we're going to use to draft the full LOSUM in the next year or two. So I think it was actually a positive thing that they had to kind of take a pause and a breather to start gathering that all, because if there's one thing I heard from a lot of PDT members, everything was moving way too quickly. So ironically, it was another positive impact as a result of COVID-19 that came out of that. So it's important also to remember that this process is still going to go on at least through April of 2021 next year. And that's not taking into consideration if COVID-19 endures, if there's going to be a need to extend that out. I'm sure the Army Corps is open to that. The good news is that they're temporary operations in this process, as well as what it will look like after the fact, are both going in our favor right now, better than they ever have before. So I want that to be very clear that the LOSUM process right now is really working well for the people that have been for so long. And that's a testament to the amount of, the decades of work and advocacy from the people in this community, and certainly in the West Coast as well. The last thing I'll say is the only known meeting for the LOSUM that's upcoming that they've got tentatively, at least right now, is April 30th. That was pushed back from, I believe, a week prior. It's April 30th between 1 and 4:30 p.m. It is, of course, a virtual web meeting, so anybody in the public who's listening, go to the Army Corps website. They'll have everything you need to, just like our Zoom meetings, to get access to be able to communicate during public comment, especially. And then if there's any questions by commissioners of the vision statement itself.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor, yes.
Okay, I have like 3 questions, but then I get to do more. So like in the title and in the discussion, the NGVD, what does that acronym stand for?
I want to say National Geodetic, I'm trying to remember the actual acronym. I'm actually looking for it.
Navigation?
Yeah, it's an elevation measurement.
Okay, because, I just didn't, normally when you put an acronym like that, it kind of summarizes something immediately before it, and I wasn't sure what it referred to or how it got put in there. I know that it had to do something with the elevation because it refers to that, but I'm not sure how it refers to it, if it's a measurement type or.
It might need to be a little insight. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but if you were to go stand in Lake Okeechobee right now, the water is not actually 11 feet, 4.47 inches. It's actually closer to 7 or 8 feet deep. It's just 11.47 feet above sea level.
Right.
So the actual NGVD is the scientific measure of the water level.
It's just a unit of measure.
Okay, so maybe you should go after the 11 foot then. I don't know. I just don't know that was the only thing I was just thinking as a drafting thing. It doesn't immediately summarize. It refers to the measurement type, but it doesn't, I was just wondering what it means. That's number 1. Number 2 is.
Just Leslie, it's National Geodetic Vertical Datum.
Okay. Of the lake level at the still. All right, so then my question has to do with the suggestions and the discussion paper with Dr. Goforth and the notes that were sent in and how we end up with that recommendation or the words that are in italics. So I'll just ask some questions. I know that I don't think I did it, but maybe a lot of people did it. I know a lot of members of the public, we all held up a green placard that says zero discharge. I don't know if I had one, but I probably had something similar. And I've gone to different meetings with different things. However, in the write-ins here and in the resolution that we're trying to pass and the suggestions that we're trying to pass on, I don't know if it's almost like creating an impossibility. You can't have zero discharge without having discharge. You have to have some discharge. So I don't know if it's zero negative discharge or having too much discharge, because you still have to have, in order to keep it at 11 feet or whatever, there has to be some balancing effect along the way. So I wasn't sure exactly how that language should read out, and I still can't find, my thing doesn't pull up like I should, but in that recommendation, the things, it's italicized at the very bottom of the report. I was wondering if those words, are we adopting and sending those words to our Congress representative? Are we talking about getting those words over to Caloosahatchee to see if they are in agreement with us on these kinds of words? Are we doing it regionally, or are we just starting with the city of Stewart now? I just wanted to know what was happening in this process. I don't want to be in a no man's land situation.
It's a great question, Vice Mayor. It's kind of a two-part answer. I'd say first, as far as the consensus building with Caloosahatchee river stakeholders, especially the city of Sanibel, we certainly made sure that whatever language we came up with wouldn't be in conflict. So that was priority number one, what we wanted to make sure. We also asked for really their consultation on how they would like to see it worded, just for the maximum benefit of both estuarial systems. Plus, we also thought about Lake Okeechobee, what about the health of the lake as well? Because certainly a healthy lake would make any water discharge either direction better. With that in mind, at the same time, the language that we chose, I would look at it as, in this document, as being, it is a vision statement, but it doesn't, if you say something that is in contrast to that vision statement, that's what we're trying to avoid, because generally the goal is to try and target this 11-foot elevation by June 1st. We know just physically we're not going to hit exactly 11 feet every year. That's just not going to happen. But by giving a goal, a number, a measurement tool for the Army Corps to shoot for and for all the stakeholders, it allows us to measure success every year, how close we can get there. Water that is discharged to get us there. The goal is to make sure it goes to the right places. And I'll give you one example. We talk about the West Coast all the time not getting enough CFS. Right now, they're only getting about 457 cubic feet per second. They want about double that year-round, regularly. And so they're only getting half the amount that they want right now as we speak. Then if you look at to the south, all the way down to Florida Bay, they're getting maybe 20-25% of the water that they want at any given time. The amount of water that is desperately needed down there especially, it'll take a very long time for them to see those numbers. The good news is a lot of projects down way further south, Army Corps is working on right now, will hopefully improve those numbers south in the future. That's infrastructure to come. So that's not really where our vision statement is talking about. We did keep that in mind with the language we drafted. This language is mostly to discuss operationally how the Army Corps, with the existing infrastructure, where we're at today, what they should shoot for and target for a goal. Yeah, we're probably in a bad hurricane year where even when we hit 11 feet in June, let's say in a bad hurricane year, we get a full 7 foot of rainfall over the course of 3 or 4 months, which is pretty dramatic, but it has happened before. It can certainly happen again. That is one of the worst case scenarios for the wet season for our area. In those situations, we might still get some discharges, but we would get far more and far worse water quality if that lake was kept at a higher level year after year after year. If you keep that lake and you target 11 feet most years, you're going to avoid a lot of those problems. And in every single, on the West Coast with the coastal communities, communities, every single time we have these discussions, just keeps coming down to around that 11-foot number. Even if we hit 11.5, we look at it as a victory compared to that 13.5 that we've had over a 35-year period.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. And to put a finer point on it, Vice Mayor, in the item on the agenda, just to summarize, it says that this vision statement, this isn't like a legally binding. This is the result of our direction for staff to unify a response, to create a response. We have our boilerplate, and this is what staff is going to use every time we message and interact with local, state, and federal agencies. So, now this is our ability to just have this is what we're going to say. This is our goal. Are you good, Commissioner Matheson?
I'd just like to wrap up and just touch on a couple of your comments, Vice Mayor. Those zero discharges signs that we all held up, and so much of the audience, that in my mind, and I think generally that was zero discharges to the St. Lucie estuary out of the S80, the locks in the South Fork. And again, Mr. Hogarth and myself, Caloosahatchee and the West Coast is entirely on board with this. Just the geography of the lake, and on the West Coast, they have many miles of marshlands. So the same discharges that are going out the Caloosahatchee, which are necessary, absolutely necessary to that estuary, and are 100% detrimental to our estuary. The discharges we get of the lake going east are 3 to 4 times more polluted because we don't have many miles of marshland. The lake geographically is deeper going into the C-44 canal. That same water going west is 3 to 4 times cleaner, and that estuary needs that natural fresh water. That's why the language says clean, beneficial discharges.
Right.
And that same point of water flowing south. So, lowering the lake, we're all trying to achieve this goal because the Caloosahatchee does not want, 2,000 CFS going out that river. That's detrimental. But over the span of the dry season, our goal, and the Corps has actually miraculously been doing that, has increased their discharges west to closer to the Caloosahatchee's request of 800 to 1,000 CFS. And in doing that, that aligns with our goal of lowering the lake so that we get zero discharges throughout the entire year.
Right, so it's a balancing effect. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that it's a balancing effect.
Commissioner Bruner.
Yes. Ben, this formulation schedule, is that you and Mr. Goforth?
No, ma'am. That was a document that was provided to all the stakeholders by the Army Corps team that's working on this. The document that you see there is basically, I was working certainly in tandem with Commissioner Matheson, and I also, that document that you saw, I gave that also to Martin County and to City of Sanibel, so they could kind of see where we were going. What that is essentially objective criteria for the LOSUM process. What we see are priority objectives and how to get there. And that was about 2 months ago, the Army Corps came to us and said, this is what we want from all our stakeholders. That's what they're putting together to help them drive the metrics for the next LORS or the next LOSUM process. So what we provided, what we came up with is in that paper I provided to you. That's just something that we sent to the Army Corps. That helps them piece together all of the data that they need from the stakeholders. We actually got into them earlier than most stakeholders because we wanted them to be able to have that as early on and start working on it. We didn't know this COVID-19 was going to pick up and just slow everything down anyway. So, but that's what that document is. It's just
They get all this stuff.
Absolutely.
They've been getting this for a couple of years, haven't they?
Yes.
Let me ask you something else. But when you're around in those meetings, was it
Yeah, the PDT meetings.
Yeah. Of all those shareholders and what you've got here, how many of those do you think would say that they would side with us here in Martin County?
That's
a quarter.
I mean, it's a difficult answer because it's not binary. There aren't even just two sides. Certainly, there are communities that would stand to benefit from the lake being that 2 feet higher by June 1st, because their concern obviously is, what do I do if the water's not there? How does that impact my business? or how does that impact my residents with drinking water? So the thing is, if you look at all the historic data though, neither the facts nor the science really back up the concern and the fear that that's not there. Crop yields have only ever increased. What we know, and something that we talk about kind of not behind the scenes like it's a secret, but it's hard to quantify the facts on crop yields year to year. You only have so much data due to just private protection laws and everything else. But what we do think we know is that the water supply users, including crops, probably overwater and oversaturate their crops by maybe as much as 20% of their use. So if you look at, and I don't want that to be just supposition either, but if you look at kind of, the facts and the data that we have on those yields and everything else we've talked about, it really makes a strong case for why this 11-foot by June 1st makes the most sense for the most amount of people. And I think that's going to come out more and more over this Lawson process.
I've read this over and over and over because I really wanted to, I guess you all know what I've said in the past. I just worry about Army Corps and what all we've done and how successful it's been and having these 2 years on our side. My biggest fear is that, because we usually get too much water every year, and my biggest fear is that side over there will get so angry if we get in a drought, a really bad drought, and they will destroy us through the press and everything else with a horrible drought. But anyway, no, I'm okay. But my fear is a terrible drought, and they'll say,
I want to say we sort of baked that into our language plan because if you look at even the Lord's 208 in 2008, you should say, if you look at 20 years even before that, it was known even by the science community that once every 7, 8, 9, 10 years, there should be a drought condition for a short amount of time. You really don't want it any more than maybe 3 months, 3 or 4 months. But that drought period actually has beneficial purposes in all of these estuarine systems and Lake Okeechobee when it happens periodically. Right. If it were happening every year, that would be a problem certainly for certain species like the snail kites and everything else. But it was baked into our plan as far as language. Even if we had one bad year for a drought that lasted 3-4 months, we're supposed to. We just haven't in the last 34 years because of the water management focus on keeping those high water levels for the yields of the crops.
Thank you, Mr. Hilbert. Commissioner, are you good?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to? Okay. So, Ms. Kindle, will you call the roll?
There's no motion.
Oh, sorry. Went out so long, I just assumed we had a motion. Okay, I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Glass-Lake, second by Commissioner Matheson. Now, Ms. Kindle, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bruner,
Yes.
Commissioner Matheson,
Yes.
Commissioner Glass-Lake,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Mayor Meyer.
Yes. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the ordinance first reading, item number 8, abandonment of right-of-way at Osceola Street. Mr. Mortelli, will you read the ordinance?
This is ordinance number 2431-2020, an ordinance of the city commission of the city of Stuart, Florida, to provide for the abandonment of certain public right-of-way within the city, being that certain 50-foot right-of-way as set forth on the plan of Kruger Park as recorded in Plat Book 1, page 25, Palm Beach, now Martin County, Florida, Public Records running east to west, described in Exhibit A, attached here to, and depicted in Exhibit B, attached here to, providing for payment of a privilege fee, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. For the record, Stephen Mayer, Development Department. The item before you tonight is coming back to you from March, early March 9th, I believe. We had a resolution, the intent to abandon right away, and this is the ordinance that would then have 2 more readings to determine the fate of that intent to abandon right away. At that meeting, you had requested staff, specifically the city attorney, had a couple of questions that need to be answered, and you will talk in the second part of the this staff presentation. The first part, I would just like to summarize the location and some of the specifics of the request. On the screen, you see the area to be abandoned. It is at the corner of Southeast Osceola Street and Monterey Avenue. It would be a continuation or a portion of Southeast Osceola Street as it east of Monterey Avenue. It is approximately, or the area of the area to be abandoned is 7,050 square feet, and the dimensions are 50 feet wide, where it becomes a rectangle, 50 feet wide by 139 feet deep, and it does have a little bit of a fan towards when it gets to the right of way. At the maximum, it's almost 70 feet wide. Go to the next one. This shows the aerial a little bit more in detail. The property, you can see that shape that I was referring to, and the applicant is the property to the south, and that is at 181 Southeast Monterey. This shows the plat, which is the Kruger Park plat, and it shows it was ultimately at that time part of an entire plat that includes what is now Snug Harbor to the north of this right of way.
When the red square is not the right of way.
Correct. The red square is the property owned by Stephen Fry, who has objected to this right of way abandonment. The area to be abandoned would be directly to the west of his property. And the area you can see on the plat, the area to the north, is now part of Snug Harbor. I think if you see the next slide.
See if the pointer is up right there, but I can't believe.
Okay, so. Great, okay. So this area right here would be parts of Snug Harbor. And in the original plat, you can see that area is right here. And the right away would be, sorry, I'm sorry, and the right away would be right there. If you look at the
Is there another?
So I need a computer.
While we look for further descriptions of the property, I'll just remind, we did deliberate this item in general before, and we all had a good sense of the property and sort of the issue largely. And this item before us is to discuss what we had directed staff to do, which was to further assess the legal implications, look at an appraised value. So I would be interested if the commission supports it, us just moving on to some of those direct questions regarding the release of the right of way.
Mr. Mayor, in light of the way that we're conducting the meeting, I just wanted to find out if there was anybody on Zoom who was speaking directly for this item, and if we knew, if they knew that the item was being conducted at this time, or anybody calling in.
We communicated with the applicant, and he is agreed to send Mr. Quazzo, who is present in the room, and there is no other public comment today, so that would be the only person. He's present in the room.
Mr. Fry is not going to participate.
I know, I spoke to Mr. Fry, and he sent us a letter, and I forwarded it to the commission.
Said he would not be attending today.
He said he may be appearing by Zoom, but he did not request public comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Mortel, I mean,
Okay, I'm happy to kind of chime in, and Steve and I can kind of go back and forth, I guess. So the commission asked me to get a second opinion on this right-of-way abandonment, and I did, and I provided a copy of that, which I have in front of me. And essentially, the concept becomes this. The right-of-way overlays, and it was actually platted right-of-way. It was a platted street, not right-of-way over the land. But the case law in Florida says that in that circumstance, you do half to the one side to the south and half to the side to the north, unless one of them says they don't want it. In this particular instance, we had moved forward in January after sending a letter to Snug Harbor, and they said they didn't want it, but it turned out not to be accurate. What they didn't want was they didn't want to pay the privilege fee, and they didn't want the city to do the abandonment. They didn't say they didn't want the land in the event the right-of-way went forward, according to the presentation at the last meeting. So as a result, we obtained a second opinion as well from Mr. Baird, and we received that late Friday afternoon. And essentially, he answered a few questions. First, if the city abandons a pro-ton of the right-of-way, to whom does the abandoned property belong? And his answer was consistent with the presentation before, and it states the long-standing rule of law is that once abandoned, the property which was the subject of the right-of-way easement reverts to the owners adjacent to the right-of-way. So in the event the commission were to abandon this right-of-way, it would revert to the owners. That is, 50% would go to Snug Harbor, 50% would go to Mr. Barron. Issue 2, who pays for the land subject to the abandonment? Our code is section 36-2. His answer was the city code establishes a privilege fee, which is to be paid by any person petitioning the city for abandonment and vacation of any street, alley, road, highway, or other place used for travel on any portion thereof. The amount of the privilege fee is to be determined by computing 100% of the value added to the adjoining real property of the petitioner by the resulting addition of the interest abandoned by the city. In this particular instance, the application included an appraisal that was done by Mr. Barron on the property. It does raise an issue, however, because the appraisal was for $26,000. The question is, does the value of Mr. Barron's property change by a lower amount if he only gets half of the appraisal or half the land, or does the value of his property still increase by $26,000 either way?
So Mr. Mortel, if I may just interrupt you there, that one of my main questions is regarding the discrepancy in the appraised value for the property that we have in the staff report, $26,000, which was presented by the applicant. I assume, did we vet that it was done by a qualified appraiser?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
that occurred.
So we can check that box off, qualified appraiser. The issue though is that in our code 13-36-2, the privilege fee is 100% of the increase in value to the petitioner. So in my layman's understanding of that, that would be whatever 50%, that southern portion, adds to Mr. Barron's property value, not some appraised value of the entire area. It may be 50% of 26,000, but it may, to your point, be, who knows? And that's why I guess a certified property appraiser needs to provide that according to our code. So I'll just say that I'm not comfortable. I mean, I would definitely need for that to be sorted out so that we are in full compliance with our own code before approval of a second reading.
And then finally, the last question is, can Snug Harbor refuse to accept the property abandoned? Pursuant to legal authority cited in the discussion above, the City Commission chooses to abandon the right-of-way pursuant to Mr. Barron's application. Then, by operation of law, one half of the property will revert to Snug Harbor regardless of whether or not Snug Harbor chooses to accept it. If Snug Harbor has no interest in maintaining the property abandoned to it, Snug Harbor could elect to convey that property to Mr. Barron or any other person or entity. In conclusion, if the city abandons a 50-foot portion of right-of-way of Osceola Avenue, the fee, interest, and same will revert to the owners of the property on each side of the center line of the right-of-way of Osceola Avenue. Number 2, the applicant, Richard Barron, is responsible for paying the city's privilege fee. And number 3, Snug Harbor will become the owner of one half of the property regardless of whether it accepts the abandoned property. And if I can just add to that and go back to our presentation. So that leads to the city commission having the right to, number one, abandon its property. So when the city passed a resolution, it determined that this property was in fact surplus and was not being used. Look at this case law, and historically, when a municipality is not using roads or not using right-of-way, it technically is responsible to give it back to the underlying property owners if the government's not going to use it. In this particular case, that decision was made by resolution after Public Works said no, it had never intended to make this a paved area or a paved road. So then you get to the second part, and that is we receive an application for this right-of-way, and the commission has to decide to abandon it. The commission could abandon half, like we have in the past, to one side when the other side doesn't apply, or all of it. But Mr. Peters testified that in this particular circumstance, he doesn't want to abandon half because to abandon half would leave him with an unusable 25 feet and there would be no future use to it. So Public Works' opinion at the earlier meeting was either abandon all of it or abandon none of it, because abandoning half of it doesn't benefit us if there's never anybody to be receiving the north half later, because the responsibility for maintenance, insurance, and upkeep doesn't diminish by the time you send crews out there to do the work. So then when we get to the commission decided to go ahead and do a resolution to abandon all of it, where we find ourselves tonight is you're here to abandon. When you abandon, half goes to Snug Harbor, half goes to Mr. Barron. So going to the mayor's comment, the question becomes, what is the appropriate privilege fee to charge and or waive, because our code allows you to waive it as well if you find that there's a basis for that.
Commissioner Bruner, yes.
I know this sounds stupid, but do you divide the lengthways?
Yeah.
In half? Not in the middle, the narrowest. You divide it.
It runs east to west. So it would be
That's all.
divided, everything adjacent to Mr. Barron's would be his half, and everything adjacent to Snug Harbor would be their half. It wouldn't divide the other way. Right.
Commissioner Matheson?
Well, as we all know, I had a hard time, I voted no, that we shouldn't abandon it because members of the public came in here and stated they had a use for that. But now, I was the sole vote in saying we shouldn't abandon it. I guess my question to our staff is, in other right-of-way abandonments, when we've had them appraised, where I have voted yes, because there's never been any opposition, contrary to this one. When the appraisal was brought back, was the appraisal for half the property. Now, I'm not specifically, I want to remove Molly's house from that. We waived that fee, and that did encompass both sides. Their property touched both sides, but recently I think we did something on Dolphin. And I'd like to know the difference in comparing those appraisals. When the appraisal was done, was that appraisal for the entire right of way or just the half the right of way that each property owner was getting?
Unfortunately, the appraisal is not attached to this agenda item, but the appraisal was for what the appraisal said it was for. So in those instances in the past, the appraisal would have described that exact purpose that it was being appraised. If it was only half that was subject to it, I can't imagine that the balance of it would have been part of the appraisal, but I can't tell you one way or the other because I don't have it in front of me. And I went to pull this appraisal to see if it commented, but I don't have it attached to the agenda item.
I apologize for that. I've seen the appraisals for the entire right of way. So it was not for half.
So we have an appraisal though that was contrary to the way the law and the code would divide up the right of way if we all agree with now two attorneys' opinions on the way the law would work.
Is that a question, Commissioner?
I guess that's a statement. But other than that, I mean, I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners on this one.
Commissioner Glassleiten?
To follow up on what Commissioner Niemeyer and Commissioner Matheson said, So what I'm hearing is we have somebody willing to pay $26,000 based on an appraisal that's legitimate, that came from a certified property appraiser, correct?
We had an application that was willing to pay $26,000. When it first came in, it was for half the property, but it was an appraisal of the whole property. Then, when Snug Harbor didn't want the property, the first reading before you was for the entire parcel. I think Mr. Quazzo would probably be best served to answer the question as to whether they're willing to pay the 26. But for the purpose of your conversation, we presume they are.
Okay, so $26,000 for, at this moment right now, for half of the property. Or for
That's
the,
what they get, that's what we're.
that's what they would get, okay? And so then if Snug Harbor does not want the other half of the property, they can give that other half of the property to Mr. Barron. Do we know if Snug Harbor has changed their mind and they do want the other half now?
Snug Harbor has a meeting tonight at 6:30 p.m. But for the purposes of our meeting, we have a second reading on this anyway, that's gonna be in 2 weeks. So it wouldn't matter. But secondly, we don't give a warranty deed.
Right, no,
We just abandon our interest, and as a result, the reverter action gives it to Snug Harbor whether we want to or not. The method would be that Snug Harbor would have to give us something rejecting it, or otherwise transfer it to Mr. Barron
It's
directly.
really none of our concern what they do after we abandon.
Yeah, correct.
Precisely. So at this point, again, that's where I was going as well. We have clarified now through the legal opinion of the city's position, looking at our code again, is that when we vote to abandon the right of way, it reverts automatically to the adjacent property owners. We don't have the ability to change that or intervene. The one property owner who might not want that liability or whatever could then offer to have a transaction with the other.
So the vote tonight is just us abandoning. Said and done. For the 26,000, each side gets a half.
Well, I mean, potentially, we could also ask for some further clarification. I know that for me, I would, if a motion were to be made, I would like to see that we have clarification in that the appraisal that is attached to this item, if we were to see it again, would be in compliance with our code, which is, I believe, and Mr. Mortel, please clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not even necessarily 50% of the proposed abandoned right-of-way, but rather what the increase in value to Mr. Barron's property would be were he to have the additional 50% of the right-of-way, which might not be, again, a property appraisal is as much an art as it is a science, I think. It's not just half of 26,000, it's could you put a garage there, could you put a pool there, you know, it might be worth more, it might be worth less.
Is that accurate?
Yes, I mean, our code says that they should pay an appraisal or a privilege fee equal to an appraised value of what this would cause their value to increase. So I don't have the appraisal in front of me, that may be what the appraisal says.
Is that what, yes.
I don't.
So we just need to have that clarified, and could you clarify that? Because you've seen the actual hard appraisal.
I have, and my recollection of what it says is that they would add that much value, but what I don't know is whether they calculated that the setbacks were needed for the entire property to get what they were going to do. It's my understanding that they don't need the entire property to do what they wanted to do, to get the $26,000 worth of value.
So if we were to move forward, if the motion were to be made, we obviously would need to have that in compliance by second reading, so that we're in compliance with our own code.
So do we, I don't applicants or something?
Yeah, I think Ms. Brown had something.
No.
Mr. Quazzo, if you'd like to answer any questions or make a statement, speak on behalf.
My name is Doc Quazzo. I'm here representing Mr. Barron in his application. I never thought that my big Italian nose would help me so much holding up my mask tonight. So that is really the only way it's standing up is my giant Italian nose. The appraisal was done that code hasn't changed from the 3 years ago, correct?
Same.
So the code, the appraisal was done to the standard of the city. It is for the entire 50 feet for the length. So I will advise Mr. Barron that he needs to get his appraisal updated to see if he only gets 50% of the property, what the value is, and we will supply that within the next 2 weeks if you so. Okay, we don't have any issue with everything else. We said all along, Snug Harbor doesn't want half of it, and that's the law. That's the law.
And so,
Thank you, Mr. Quezada. Vice Mayor?
yes, so he's paid the application and everything, so if he only wants a half of it, or if we abandon it, the whole process is the abandonment process, so the other half, we still keep that, or does that go to the entire thing is abandoned? Or Snug Harbor doesn't want it? What happens to the other half that nobody's using? And does Mr. Barron have to pay the entire fee because now we've gotten this entire property involved in an abandonment process?
So there is no, I mean, I suppose the commission could do partial abandonment of the property if it was inclined. The application is for an entire abandonment. Dave Peters, the Public Works Director, spoke at the first meeting and said he recommended against only abandoning half because the city would still have to insure, still have to maintain, and still have the liability. So his thought process was, if you're only gonna abandon half, don't abandon it all, because it doesn't benefit the city to do that. But if you are gonna abandon, it would help the city because it would take it off it would put it on tax rolls, it would take it off his maintenance schedule and off the insurance expenses, et cetera. So his recommendation was to abandon the whole thing. Once you abandon the whole thing, you don't get to decide who gets what. The law says 50% goes to Snug Harbor and 50% goes to Mr. Barron, regardless of who pays, regardless of if anybody pays. If Mr. Barron paid $26,000 and Snug Harbor paid $0, it would still go to Snug Harbor, and it would still go to Mr. Barron accordingly.
I wanted to ask,
Yes, Commissioner.
do we still need an appraisal? Why do we want an appraisal? We have to have it?
We have an appraisal.
We have an appraisal, but that appraisal is not in compliance with our code.
Well, we're not sure if it is yet.
Well, it may not be, Well, actually, didn't Mr. Quezada just say that the appraisal was for the entire property, not for 50% of the property? So.
Well, I was just thinking of making a motion and to approve if we bring in the second appraisal in 2 weeks. Bring it here. We're glad to see it.
So a motion for approval with an updated appraisal.
Yes.
Right, here a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Bruner, a second by Commissioner Glassly.
I have one question to staff and my fellow commissioners.
Yes, Commissioner.
Stuck with me, you know, in our second opinion in the letter, and it was the attorney's language that he wrote. In effect, the city commission is finding that the abandonment of the right-of-way would further public health, safety, and general welfare of the city. And then he goes on, he cites the case, and he says, there's one caveat, that being that a city cannot abandon a right-of-way for the benefit of a purely private interest. And that's something I keep stumbling over, and this is different because we've never had anyone who's opposed to a right-of-way.
But let's be clear, they weren't opposed to the right-of-way abandonment, they were opposed to paying for it.
And I think
There's a difference.
Snug Harbor's
Is that not correct?
original opinion was they were opposed to the abandonment.
Because they didn't want to pay for it. Mike?
Well,
I don't know.
Snug Harbor's original letter was they didn't want it. Then Mr. Fry got involved and we had a meeting and Mr. Fry came and the commandant from Snug Harbor came and said, it's our opinion that we'd rather have you not do the abandonment, but if you're gonna, we don't want to pay for it. And so we said, okay, why don't you let us know how you feel about it if we were to not charge you anything? And then we did the second letter of opinion, and we come to find out it doesn't matter whether we charge them or anything or not, because it would revert to them.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. I'll just kind of volley you back there, Commissioner Matheson. Purely private interest, I hear what you're saying there, but remember, staff is also, staff has said that this is not any public use as far as staff's perspective is concerned, public works perspective is concerned. And it is at a cost to our taxpayers to maintain it, to insure it, the liability. So one could argue that there is something beyond a purely private interest here, that this is in the public interest to eliminate that extra liability.
So it benefits the general welfare of our residents.
And the taxes will get on it.
That could be argued.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could argue anything, but based on what I think, I agree, based on what our staff is saying, is that it would actually cost more for us to maintain it. Therefore, it is in the public's best interest.
Okay, so can I add,
Yes, Vice Mayor.
there's a motion and a second, right?
There indeed is.
Okay. So, Mr. Mortel and, Mr. Mayor, if and when, I've met with Mr. Quazza, and I've met with Mr. Barron, and I'm here with an open mind on this matter. I'm just concerned that we are, if this comes up again, we know we had the folks from, Snug Harbor who came out. But what happens when Mr. Barron wants to build what I call, or I've been told, is a garage? And I know that we don't have to have building plans or know exactly what he's gonna do right now. But what if he builds that or builds a mother-in-law quarters or something, and they say that it's a monstrosity and they're opposed to it at the time when that comes in for building, and it just creates a bad edge in the neighborhood.
Well,
how do we deal with that now to ensure that we ask him what exactly he's gonna do?
if he were to submit a building permit for something that met code, we would issue a permit.
We'd have to issue a permit after we've allowed him to pay the privilege fee and be able to use it. I hear you, and I just can see down the road when he decides to build something in there that we're gonna be having people come here again, in front of us.
But, I mean, that's the case with anybody.
I hear you,
that-
I hear you.
I mean, we can't discriminate.
And, I'm just, I just want the public to know that I hear and I know what their concerns are. And like Commissioner Matheson says, is it for purely private interest, and where do we balance out the health and welfare? I think that I asked Mr. Peters some questions when he presented to us. And I've talked to staff and I've heard them say that it's not serving any interest of the city that's going to be harmed by this 50 feet or so. And I think I listened to what Mr. Fry had brought up and also what the Commandant had brought up. And in fact, Snug Harbor doesn't, they didn't say that they were not going to be harmed per se, but they didn't say that, I didn't hear them say that it would hurt anything in their development, which is their neighborhood preserving, their preserved area. So, it's been there a long time. How long has the plat been, Mr. Mortel? In the 40s?
Snug Harbor was platted in 1946. This was platted
Prior
in
to.
1926.
Okay, so the 20s and then the 40s.
But Snug Harbor built houses right up to this right of way. The right of way was there first. So
Right.
Snug Harbor
Snug
was
Harbor
on notice that
violated
this
the-
would happen.
Right.
This isn't something that happened after they moved in.
Okay, are there any other discrete questions on this item before we call the vote? Does anybody need any more information?
May I say something?
Yes, Commissioner.
I don't know if you'll agree with it or not before we go through, but it's on my heart to, it's $26,000. And to, the man that came here, Mr. we married and talked, I remember asking him, how much percentage is it gonna go up feeding people and their electric bills and all that? And he said, well, you know, it's just gonna keep going. I read more today, it's 40%, we need more and more. And I wanted to, just a suggestion, that the $26,000 that we give it to House of Hope to help feed the electric bills and rents and things, or whatever they wanna do with it. And that way maybe everyone would be happy.
That's a very.
Unfortunately, I have to look at the code. I don't think you can. I believe, and I have to look it up again, but I think that our code says that the money has to be dedicated to the acquisition and or maintenance of other right of way. So you'd have to make an exception to the code to do that, but I can look it up and have that answer by second reading.
Are you requesting to amend your motion?
Well, yes, to give the money to the House of Hope.
You amend your second?
Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable with that, just for the simple fact that we're not sure if we can do that. I would rather, we can make that amendment on second reading if our attorney comes back and says that. And I'm not comfortable picking one charity over another.
And
I
it
mean,
says such fees be deposited into the city property management fund to be used exclusively for the acquisition, operation, and maintenance of other public properties of the city. So the code.
So that answers the question.
Yeah, and we can talk about it another time, so let's just state,
Your original motion?
yes,
Skinner Lane.
Ms. Clerk.
Yes, I have a motion for approval with updated appraisal at next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Bruner, and I hear you, and I respect that idea. I think that was very kind, big-hearted. Okay, we'll call the vote, Ms. Kendall.
Okay, Commissioner Matheson,
Yes.
Commissioner Glass Layton,
Yes.
Commissioner Bruner,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Mayor Meyer.
Yes. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Guazo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to item number 9, ordinance on second reading, amendment to the city tree replacement code to comply with state statute and innovative stormwater design.
Ordinance 2432/2020, an ordinance of the city of Stewart, Florida, amending the existing chapter 5 of the city's land development code entitled Resource Protection Related Development Standards to comply with state statute regarding tree removal permits and to promote innovative stormwater treatment and low impact development practices to allow the city's tree replacement fund to be utilized for innovative stormwater treatment systems on public lands, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Mr. Freeman, before you begin, so you and the vice mayor are in on this mask game together.
It's not deliberate.
Nice pattern.
I wanted something more in line with the
Yeah. They call it power clashing.
Yeah, I like it.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, please.
If Commission recall, this was presented on the 9th of March, first reading. Some comments were made about inclusion of the Royal Poinciana and the Sable Park. Those have been included now in the ordinance. Other than that, there have been no changes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll move approval since there's not any changes. Move approval on second reading to ordinance number 2432/2020.
Second.
I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Glass Layton and a second by Vice Mayor Clark. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote on the board? Seeing none, Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Bruner,
Yes.
Commissioner Glass Layton,
Yes.
Commissioner Matheson,
Yes.
Mayor Meyer.
Yes. Yes, ordinance carries unanimously on second reading. Thank you, Mr. Mortel.
Well,
I didn't get one.
Thank you, Mr.
we
Freeman.
helped out with that too. I didn't know you had the interest.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah.
What'd you
okay.
give him?
Moving on to item number 10, Avonlea PUD amendment, parcel B, parcel 16. This is a quasi judicial item. Mr. Mortel.
This is ordinance 2434/2020, an ordinance of the city commission of the city of Stewart, Florida, being the third amendment of ordinance number 2307-2015, also known as the new Avonlea Planned Unit Development PUD, consisting of 12.4 acres zoned residential planned unit development or RPUD, 16.24 acres zoned commercial planned unit development CPUD, and 20.4 acres of wetland upland preserved zoned RPUD, for a total of 49.04 acres. Said PUD being generally located between the northeast Dixie Highway to the south, land on both sides of Green River Parkway on the west, land on both sides of Cardinal Avenue on the east, and the city boundary to the north, being more fully described by Exhibit A attached. Amending said PUD to provide for the approval of the master parcel site plan for the Avonlea Crossings Parcel B, which is parcel 16, providing for a master offsite infrastructure plan for the entire PUD, providing for revised and additional development conditions of approval, providing for amended and new timetables for development, declaring the plan to be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, providing directions to the city clerk, providing for repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Do the commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose?
I have none, and I'm here with an open mind.
I am not out here with an open mind.
I have none, but I will be recusing myself.
Commissioner Matheson, did Ryan give you that form? Or?
Yes, I have submitted the fill out.
I have none, I'm here with an open mind.
I have none since first reading, and I am here with an open mind as well. All those giving testimony, please stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn in by the city attorney.
Let the record reflect that there are two, I'm going to pretend on the screen, 3 people being sworn. I should also note that the Supreme Court of the state of Florida allows people to be sworn remotely. I provided a copy of that to the city manager, the order. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Let the record reflect that all 3 have testified affirmatively.
Can I ask,
Yes, Commissioner.
has there been any changes to this?
No, Mayor. Steve, Mayor, for the record, the open department, there has not been any changes to the ordinance since first reading.
Well, I move to approve ordinance number 2434-2020.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion for approval by Commissioner Bruner and a second by Vice Mayor Clark. Is there any further discussion on this board? Any further questions before we take a vote on this question, judicial item? Well, I guess the hearing is closed. Ms. Kendall, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Van Slyten? Yes. Commissioner Matheson?
I abstain.
Commissioner Bruner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Meyer?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously on second reading with Commissioner Matheson abstaining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to point out that Mr. Hernandez is like floating from a helicopter up there.
It's Azul.
You're on top of the water tower.
Azul is his water
I like that.
Hernandez.
Yeah, he's been
on the
on.
water tower. All right, Christian, I know we haven't got to see each other as much as we are used to. Is there anything else we want to discuss before we adjourn?
I just want to let Commissioners Matheson and Layton know that I will check with Roz tomorrow and make sure that we get you a copy of the blue and yellow payslip.
That way we can all learn that
You as
more.
well.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, we will adjourn at 7:19.